Most men today, their problem is overmothered, underfathered, still in their 20s and 30s, living at home with their mother being overmothered and underfathered. A mother's instinct is to protect and to nourish and to keep him from harm's way, which is exactly what he needs when he's a baby. But when he becomes a grown man, he needs a father to say, you know what? Life is about risk and responsibility. Go get a job or you will be hungry. Get off the payroll. Take responsibility for yourself. It's time to man up. It's time to grow up, and don't run to your mother. There's something in a young man that longs for that. There's something in a young man that says, yes, now I'm with my father, and my father is teaching me how to be a man so that one day I can be a father.
I'd like to start this video by thanking Pastor Mark Driscoll from my hometown here in Scottsdale, Arizona, for always giving woke, liberal, feminist, post-religious content creators like myself something to talk about. If guys like this finally evolve and toxic masculinity disappears, I'm out of a job and I'll have to go back to, I don't know, cooking videos. And if you're new here, I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take 2, where I share the before and after on my very religious trad wife life and getting to the other side where I am today. I decided to do this video today because it's something that I thought about a lot when I was raising my kids Mormon for 24 years. I believed that Heavenly Father had created Adam and Eve in the garden to be married and to be literally an American nuclear family type of model with a husband and wife who leave their tribe, cleave to one another, and then reproduce little babies who then are going to go off and do their own thing in a copy-paste type of manner. And I spent a lot of time listening to Sunday school lessons and reading books and studying the importance of fathers in the home and how many problems come about when there isn't a father in a home. And I actually would say that it was one of my greatest fears in life for my children, something happening to Jake, something happening to our marriage, and having to raise them as a single woman. I believed that my children's future happiness depended in large part on having both a mother and a father inside the home. It was my obsession. So much was it my obsession that as I became victimized more and more frequently and brutally by domestic violence over the years, I did this cost-benefit analysis at times thinking, but when Jake is amazing, he's a good dad, and my kids need that. So I'm going to take the bad with the good because it far outweighs being a single mom. And towards the end, as my marriage was literally imploding and my life with it, I had these moments where I sat down with my diary and listed out the pros and cons of leaving versus staying. And it got to where one of the only things on my list of pros was this: my kids need to have their dad. And then it came down to just Sunday dinners, sitting at the table with all of my kids and their dad and being a family. My children need that more than I need happiness and safety on the other side. I deeply believed that to raise my kids without their dad would doom them all to failure in life. So for that and other reasons, like being financially stuck and believing that divorce would doom me to hell, I decided to stay. Then, shockingly and unfortunately, my husband took that choice out of my hands, and my 24-year marriage ended, and I found myself on the other side as a single mom. I was given full custody of the kids that we still had at home from the very beginning. And if I'm being honest, I was a married single mom for years before that. My husband and I had had an extended separation. He was on the road a lot of the time, and he just disappeared and ghosted us off and on throughout the last 10 years of my marriage. In many ways, I was single parenting long before that. And you know what? My kids were completely happy. My kids were actually better than they had been when Dad was in the house, and their lives improved dramatically, except for the finances, which that wasn't my fault. And their futures are exponentially better than I believe they would have been had he stayed in the home. And I have an interesting situation because I'm able to compare my oldest son, who was raised very much by Dad, and my youngest son, who was raised exclusively by me, and then my partner who came into his life when he was 9 years old and is a very emotionally mature, more of a mothering personality than your average man. And this younger son, raised by a single mom, without dad in the home, and then with a very tender-hearted stepfather, is so emotionally mature and centered and focused and intentional with how he lives his life. Let me give you just a couple examples of this. My little 15-year-old has a girlfriend who's being raised by two grandmas. And he's been going over to their house on Tuesday nights and cooking dinner. He texts me for recipes and then texts them to the grandmas, and they go and do the grocery shopping, and he goes over and he's the chef. And as we were driving to school one day, I asked him, it's like, what motivated you to do this? It's the cutest thing in the world. And he's showing off some of his cooking skills, impressing his girlfriend. I thought it was all about that. But here's what he said. He said, I know that grandmas, they're older and they get tired and they're raising teenagers that they didn't expect to raise. And I don't know, I just wanted to do something nice so that one day a week they could take a break from having to figure out dinner. Why is my son in tune with grandmas raising teenagers and what it means to have one day off from cooking dinner? Because he's been raised by a mom to whom he's very emotionally connected. When friends drive him home from school, if they come inside the house at all, the first thing he always does is make sure that everybody has water and something to eat and anything else that they need. Like, who's hungry? Does anybody need a granola bar? Do you need a water bottle for the ride back home? His little son didn't have a man in his life, and he didn't need it. It's interesting that most of his friends are girls, including his girlfriend. So he runs around with this pack of girls, and it's so sweet that whenever he's on the phone with me with his friends, he always says, I love you. And I hear him expressing love to all of his friends because he's running with a girl pack. And the other guys that have been drawn into this pack of females, they also express a lot of affection. They're very respectful of one another and, again, very empathetic towards each other's needs. The reason I'm even doing this video today is this morning when I got in the car to drive my son to his high school, he asked me, how are you feeling about life today, Mom? And I thought, that's such an interesting question for a 15-year-old. And I gave him a couple answers. I told him how things were going and a couple of things I was worried about in my schedule for today. And he gives me a little fist bump and he goes, Mom, you got this. You got this. Relationship guru and genius Esther Perel has done a lot of research into boys being raised by women versus men and the need for a father in the home in light of the fact that there are so many single women in the world and so many divorces and so many absentee fathers. So she went down this rabbit hole herself. Do boys need a father in the home? Is the problem with men over-mothering and under-fathering, as Martin Driscoll so eloquently shares? And she noted some really interesting things. She noted that boys who are raised by moms are notably more empathetic. And she says there's some reasons for this. After age 3, we begin to disconnect emotionally from boys, and we give them less affection, less touching, less cuddling. We start to deprive them of the small physical signs of love. Where our daughters, we're still doing all that stuff after age 3. We're brushing their hair, we're holding them on our laps, we're embracing them. But for some reason, psychologically, we disconnect from boys, which she says begins this systemic dismantling of boys' attunement to their own emotions. So then as boys start to engage in sports and stuff, it becomes all about performance. It becomes about competence and competition. And those become the measure of a boy's self-worth. And she says that you see this in conversations at the dinner table. If a boy sits down at the table with mom after a sports game and says, this thing happened out in the field, then mom will say, oh, I'm really sorry. And how did you feel about that? And then how did you deal with that so that you could get to a place of resolution and reparativeness? Where dad, he's only thinking about the performance of the competition because that's the petri dish that he was raised in. So he's going to look at, how did my son perform? How did my son compete? Well, then what did you do? Did you win the game? I hope you got out there and got them. I hope you showed them. But in Esther's research, she didn't find that the difference between being parented by mothers and being parented by fathers was actually a negative towards the single moms, that overmothering was a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. she found that it actually led to more empathy, more emotional self-awareness. She found that these men being raised by single mothers or having less impact from fathers in the home, maybe the dad just works a lot, or maybe he's not present in the kid's life for most of the time, that they are better partners, that they're more likely to be communal and cooperative, especially if they have a badass single mom who's teaching them how to be providers as well as nurturers. These are some of the best men on the face of planet Earth. They have stepped away from the toxic masculinity cycle that's been passed down from generation to generation, and they step into a new modern masculinity that is both strong and nurturing. So really, despite what Mark Driscoll thinks in his little head, research and a lot of experience shows that the mama's boys win. They really bring it. And honestly, I think that's why guys like Mark don't like the mama's boys, because they are not likely to join Mark Driscoll's church and step into this patriarchal system of the gendered roles where I'm in charge and you have to do all of my laundry and have all the babies and cook the sourdough bread. They're a new, enlightened, empathetic group of men that guys like Mark can't control. And it's got to be terrifying for them. And let me tell you, they're the best guys that you can possibly be with. I know I brag a lot about my partner, Kevin, but he's truly amazing. And I wish that I could patent him and replicate it, because everybody out there would want their own Kevin. He is the best of the best. And a lot of that is, as I peel back his onion layers, because he had a mom that was extremely influential in his life. And part of it was just accidental. Kevin was raised in the 1970s and 80s in a very old-fashioned lifestyle on a farm in a very old-fashioned community in Idaho. So Dad, most of the time, was out in the fields, where Kevin also spent a lot of his time. But Kevin also, growing up, had to do a lot of assisting his mom. There's a real difference, too, in farm life versus 1950s suburb life, where the wives are just ornaments that are, I don't know, whipping up the TV dinners and prancing around their high heels. And in farm life, the women have equal value to the men because it's a fight for survival. The role within the home, the role with the backyard garden and the kids and all that stuff was just as important as the farmer out in the fields. So Kevin had this perception of his mom having high value. Another unique feature of Kevin's childhood was that all of the grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and everybody lived really close by. So he had what humans are supposed to have, that tribal structure, where he then had grandmothers and other female elders in his tribe that he had those close relationships with and had to intermingle with them and learn how to talk to them, which is one tip that Esther Perel gives for raising children, both boys and girls, having them sit down at the dinner table with elder adults so that they can learn to relate to them. Really important. It's actually kind of ironic when you hear people say that the worst thing in the world that can ever happen to a boy is to be raised without a dad, when truly, according to statistics and data, the worst thing that can happen to a boy is to be raised without a tribe. Humans should be tribal, with multi-generational caretakers, not just the mom and the dad. When dads parent without oversight from elders, without close-knit villages, they actually tend to be more harsh and less attentive. Modern fatherhood is modeled on a very problematic, capitalistic, very flawed system. Within the tribe, like what Kevin was raised in, the elders are there not only tending to the child, but also making sure that the parents aren't over or under parenting and supporting them. And my partner just happened to have that growing up. And so I have the best partner in the world because he was raised tribally, and he was raised with a close connective relationship with his mom, which trained him to be close and connective as a partner and as a dad and as a coworker and a neighbor and everything else. But for all the boys who don't have tribes, that are just living in our modern nuclear family model, statistics show that those raised exclusively by moms with no dad in the home fare far better than those raised with just dads or with overbearing dads. Not that there aren't amazing single dads out there. Shout out to all of you parents of either gender who are showing up for your kids every day and doing your best. But as the majority of single parents are female, And single moms tend to get a really bad rap. Data shows that you're actually slaying. So keep slaying. You all know the quote that the hand that rocks the cradle has the power to change the world. We as moms are changing the future of the world with every child that we raise. So let's do it intentionally. And I will post an Esther Perel link in the description for you to check out some of her stuff. Highly recommend all of her research on this topic. Thanks for watching. I will be hanging out in the comments.